Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update, second part there for the 5th of November 2024. Sorry I'm a little bit late today. I got stuck into a YouTube rabbit hole. I watch these reaction videos of like opera singers and classical musicians reacting to rock songs, like Charismatic Voice and Virgin Rock. And I came across Virgin Rock had done a couple, and it was like, oh, Dr. Hook, Sylvia's mother. My dad used to play that all the time. It's a song of our youth. As 3 children, I've got 2 sisters. That is a song of our youth, right? And she's done a whole reaction to it, and it goes through the real story of it. Fascinating. Got sucked into that, and it was covered with the Rolling Stone by Dr. Hook, and that was really funny, and it was a great reaction. And then before you know it, I've lost an hour. My goodness, YouTube does that to you, doesn't it? I don't need to tell you, because many of you probably go down rabbit holes with me. Okay, let's get to the Kyiv Independent, talking about military aid and assistance, starting with $600 million from the World Bank under the RISE initiative going to Ukraine. Ukraine signed agreements with the World Bank totaling nearly $600 million under the Resilient, Inclusive and Sustainable Enterprise project. Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal has announced the project is aimed at supporting a small and medium-sized businesses, green initiatives and digitalization. So it's about getting Ukraine into the future, if you like, future-proofing them, making sure that, I presume this is how I'd interpret it, that after the war is over, they're in a good place to be able to compete in the world market, right? There's no point any entity in the world piling money into Ukraine just for the sake, just a black hole, right, of just money. Oh, we're going to keep sustaining you, just you can spend this on what you like or whatever. It's like, no, right, if we're going to invest money into you, or we're going to help you, we need to help you to maintain yourselves as life goes on, right? So what's happening after this war ends? We need to make sure that you are able to compete. So our investment might be there's a return on investment, or we just want to see you be able to stand on your own 2 feet going forward. And that means that you need to be ahead of the game with digitalization and green initiatives, small and medium sized businesses as well. These are your engines of stability and growth. And it's just about being able to compete on the world stage and think about, well, what are the challenges of the future? Okay, climate, growing digitalization of society. Okay, you need to be in a good place to be able to compete there. So I think there's no surprise that that's a kind of investment that you see from the World Bank there. Okay, Canada has sent Ukraine its first ordered NASAMS air defense system. Goodness me, this was ordered, what was it, back in 2022 or something? Or maybe early 23. But this is, I think this has been one that has been like majorly delayed, and Canada were pretty much blaming the US for that delay. Although some people were blaming Canada for buying the wrong kind of thing anyway, and ordering something that might take a long time, and so on and so forth. So the end result is that there is this bunch of money that's been spent on Ukraine that has not come to fruition until now, but I guess better late than never. So the NASAMS air defense is going to be in Ukraine by the end of the year. Excellent, eventually. Australia will donate 14 rigid hull boats to Ukraine, valued at $14 million. Wow, is that $1 million each? Expensive boats. The Embassy of Ukraine in Australia and New Zealand confirmed it might half of that money might be actually transferring those boats out there. Because actually, when you think about it, imagine you had 14 boats of that size. You said, right, let's go and get those out to Ukraine. And you're thinking, okay, how are you going to do that? How much money is that going to cost? Who are you going to charter to get those 14 boats out there? 14 cargo cargo holds on a containers. That's the word I was trying to think of, on a cargo ship, and then that goes to there. How do you get them from there into Ukraine? Ukraine's a war-torn country. Okay, we're using military aircraft. There's going to be a lot of cost. It's probably like, yeah, here's 14 boats, 14 million, of which 6 million is us getting the boats out there. I don't know, I'm making that up, but it does make you wonder. Okay, Tony Hu, says Colby Badwa, former Department of Defense official and former Raytheon manager for Taiwan's Patriot program, says that Ukraine did receive Hawks from Taiwan. This is fascinating. So I don't know if you remember, goodness me, might even have, this was They were talking about Hawks in 2022. I'm sure of it. I was reporting on Hawks in 2022. These are old, Vietnam era systems that have been updated, admittedly. It's still used in a number of countries. Spain has given a bunch of Hawks to Ukraine. I presume the US has as well. Now, there was this idea that Taiwan had 50-something Hawk systems that they were going to give to Ukraine. And it was all going to happen. Everyone's like, oh, that's brilliant. And then suddenly it's like, no, it's not happening. And it could be that China, being a threat, has meant that they want to keep all those systems or whatever it was. But anyway, it turns out that they did eventually, or at least some of them have gone to Ukraine. There was a lot of reporting on this, as I was just saying, but the Taiwanese government has denied, and we haven't seen any visual confirmation of Taiwanese Hawk systems in Ukraine. So this is probably the most credible indication yet, though, so somebody saying that they did receive Hawks. How many? Don't know. But we've seen these being used, as in there's visual evidence of Hawks firing off against drones and whatnot, Shahids, I think, more than anything. But it'd be good if Ukraine can get hold of those. And there were subsequent contracts done with the US with regard to the upkeep of Hawks as well. I don't know how many missiles would be hanging around in the world. It's an obsolete system now, pretty much. So I guess, the thing is that any country that's got weapons like this is unlikely to use great quantities of the missiles once you've trained up on them. And I don't know if you do those on simulators rather than the real thing. And, any country that operates them has got stockpiles of these, and I'm pretty sure Ukraine would be first on the list for delivery of those, especially if you're selling your stock off to whoever's helping Ukraine or to Ukraine directly. Christopher Miller from the Financial Times says, a positive development, quote, there have been significant improvements in partner supplies to the front line, with an increase in deliveries under support packages. Artillery supplies have also seen marked improvements. So this is building on the idea that the artillery ammunition is getting to Ukraine now. They've closed the gap in terms of having more artillery ammunition themselves. So the 1-to-7 ratio is supposedly 1-to-2. Who knows how accurate that is? But let's assume that they've closed the gap to some degree. And that will be because Ukraine has a bunch more of the artillery ammunition, and arguably because Russia don't. So it's a double whammy there, where Russia are probably running short. That's why we see that supposedly that half of their ammunition is coming from North Korea. And there's a lot to be said for the ammunition coming from North Korea being not so great. But anyway, that gap is being closed significantly. But it's great to hear that actually supplies are getting to Ukraine more quickly. There's an expediting these pledges that the complaint has so often been takes so long to go from, we'll give you this, to that ending up in Ukraine. They have to be refurbished. This has to happen. That has to happen, and it just partner countries have been traditionally very slow at sorting that out. And Zelensky is indicating that actually that's sped up and things are looking much better. That's really good news. Right, Germany to Ukraine, and thanks, matey, for pointing out that my video yesterday. Sorry that my video yesterday ended up being released and then re-released, and it took me much longer. I should have just re-recorded it. It took me forever to take these screen grabs. I basically had the wrong screen being recorded, so I was talking about everything and there was no change in the images, so I then had to go and take screen grabs of everything I did and show that to you, put that on in video, sew it all up and render it, and hours later, a waste of time. Should have just re-recorded it. Anyway, during her visit to Ukraine, so thanks, Germany to Ukraine was one of the first that told me. During her visit to Ukraine today, Germany's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Annalena Baerbock, pledged €200 million, which is more than dollars. It's worth, so €1, I don't know what the exchange rate is, but that's probably going to be something like $230 million, something like that. €200 million in additional humanitarian aid, which is to be used for emergency relief measures for the Ukrainian population. With these funds, Ukrainians, for example, could be provided with essentials such as blankets or warm winter coats to combat the icy temperatures, also receive heating oil or firewood, so on and so forth. I don't know, but that's all good news. The German defence concern Rymetal is completing the construction of a second plant in Ukraine, according to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. He emphasised the importance of the German defence industry for the security of Europe and support for Ukraine's defence. I think concerns like Rymetal are absolutely integral, not only for Ukraine's defence, but also for this growing need for Europe to stand on its own 2 feet, given the US's potential drawing back away from Europe. And even if, say, Harris wins the election today and gets in and has a great support for Ukraine, I think you will start seeing the US pivoting somewhat to China as having to put some resources there, China and Taiwan. I wonder whether just Europe is necessarily going to have to be playing a much larger role, which is kind of what many Americans want. There are flip sides to that for America, which is they don't get to be the dominating force in Europe and thus around the globe. They have to take a bit of a back seat. But I think these German concerns are going to be super important for that. There are no details, though, of what the factory will be producing. We know they're going to be producing Lynx. I think Rymetal are behind the Lynx infantry fighting vehicles being produced there. I'm not sure who's going to produce the Fuchs APCs. Let's have a look at that, because you've got these are due to be produced at some point. I don't think it is Rymetal, though. Oh, it is. Oh, there you go. Rymetal, manufactured and further developed by Rymetal manned military vehicles. So, yes, that's Rymetal. So it could be. Well, I presume they've already got that in place. Well, I don't know. Maybe you need 2 factories, one for the Lynx, one for the Fuchs, and that's a Fuchs one that's up and running. I don't know. German aid to Ukraine will no doubt have some details on that, but that's good news. And if that is completing the construction, whether that means that's just the building of the building, if you like, not the capital inside, I don't know. I presume that would mean the whole thing and it's ready to go. Then it's just like, okay, we're in November. Will you be able to make a single Fuchs APC by the end of the year? I mean, that'd be great. We're starting to see Bogdana being built at 20 every month at the moment, and obviously, well, you presume that would go up. Remember last time we looked, it was like 2. Well, not last time. I remember when it was like 2 a month, and it was like 10, then 12 a month, and now 20. And that's going to be super useful. They're producing their own artillery ammunition to go with that, although there are these bottlenecks around the world in terms of explosives and other resources you need to make those. I wonder if there's anything here about Ukraine. Just Rymetal announced that they want to start to produce KF-41 and TPZ Fuchs 2 in Ukraine as soon as 2024. There is uncertainty around the project, though, and that's from a July piece on a German site. But I imagine that this could well be to do with the Fuchs production. Okay, Noel Report says that Ukraine and Lithuania have signed a memorandum of joint production of drones, ammunition and electronic warfare equipment announced by the Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov. Lithuanian Defense Minister has visited Kiev to formalise this partnership. I wasn't even going to attempt to pronounce their name. Ukraine has received 230 pickups and 240 mine detectors from Lithuania as part of the demining coalition, again according to Rustem Umerov. So that's fantastic there. Lithuania, like all the Baltic nations, are just awesome in their support for Ukraine. Now, I went through this yesterday talking about, so just to remind you, Kobe Badwell was saying, look, 52.1 billion has gone from the US defense industrial base to date, has gone into that. Once all funds are obligated, that'll be over 60 billion in terms of aid to Ukraine. So aid to Ukraine essentially is going into the US to produce stuff as an economic stimulus, and there's how the money goes in terms of direct investments and then industrial base impacts across the supply chains. And I talked about that can multiply across other supply chains that aren't even a direct supply chain. So, you know, your sandwich producers if you loads more jobs in this particular factory, then you got more people earning. You might have more houses being built. You might have more, whatever. That's a kind of that money impacts the larger communities in which those jobs are at, and that can be an effect of a Ukraine aid package, right, is actually giving all of that economic impact across the United States. Okay, so we talked about that yesterday. John Ridge says, as a result of these investments, General Dynamics OTS opened a new plant in Dallas. It's a whole new plant as a result of the Ukraine war being started. Now, this is where you get cynics talking about, the war's only taking place because the industrial base. This is kind of Robert RFK Jr.'s position. It's the military industrial base that's starting these wars and perpetuating them. No, that's not why these wars are taking place. And you might get some kind of lobbying in terms of so say you are a Republican senator or congressman or woman in one of these areas where there is a plant, you might get lobbying, you might get that lawmaker taken out to lunch by General Dynamics OTS to say, look mate, look at these jobs. We're going to give you a very nice, we might even contribute to your campaign a little bit. Bit of lobbying there. So we give you $20,000 for your campaign to get re-elected if you support. There's a quid pro quo that goes on. It's like the National Rifle Association gives money to every single Republican lawmaker in Congress, full stop. I don't think there's a single Republican lawmaker that doesn't take money from the NRA. Certainly used to be the case. And there's, of course, a quid pro quo. So when it comes to gun regulation, Republicans always vote against it. Why? Because they get their campaign donations from it. So I'm against lobbying, right? I think lobbying is legalized corruption. But the real politique of me here is that you probably will get lobbying from the defense industry, since you get lobbying from every bloody industry, in some of these places where they'll be going to the senators and lawmakers who might otherwise be voting against support for Ukraine and saying, hey, we'll contribute to your campaign if you vote for these sort of aid packages or something. That I don't know. I'm completely speculating it. But having said that, there have been loads of Republican congressmen, and not so much as senators, but the House of Representatives, so representatives who have voted against the Ukraine aid bills when their own districts would be profiting from these kind of investments. So maybe lobbying isn't happening nearly as much as we think it might be. But anyway, I digress. So John Ridge here says it will manufacture. So this new plant in Dallas will manufacture around more than 25,000 155mm projectile bodies per month and create hundreds of jobs. Aid to Ukraine is an investment in both our economy and our security. This is on the ballot tomorrow. So John Ridge, who I know is kind of fairly supportive of the Harris ticket, saying, look, like aid to Ukraine is good. Here's a military man saying aid to Ukraine is good for Ukraine, obviously, but it's good for the US. And there's only one ticket that's really going to ring fence that kind of investment, and it's not the Trump-Vance ticket, by their own words, but essentially. Right, we captured a lot of Russian weapons from Hamas and may send them to Ukraine, says an Israeli politician. Weapons seized in Gaza, and I've seen pictures of this, should go to Kiev since Ukraine and Israel face the same enemies, says Amir Weitman, chairman to the Liberals in the Israeli governing Likud party. So that's interesting. Now, the Russians have helped supply Hezbollah, Hamas with weaponry. We've even heard Hamas militants use Russian language, which indicates that they've been trained by the Russians. We have, seen that weaponry, and that weaponry is, of course, the same kind of weaponry that the Soviet-era Ukrainian army would have been using, possibly still does, and so they would know what to do with that. That'd be very useful for the Ukrainians. Now, the Ukrainian Legion in Poland has reportedly received over 500 applications. We heard some contradicting data about this, that they were looking at getting these units set up and trained outside of these kind of diaspora units outside of Ukraine. Poland was going to do this. I think were Czechia going to do this as well. And then there were claims that actually they weren't getting nearly enough people to do that. 500 isn't a great amount, I would have thought, but it's also not nothing. So they've received over 500 applicants. The recruitment centre in Poland has received over five applications in a month from the Ukrainians in 30 different countries. So I don't know how pragmatically easy that's going to be to get those people, train them up, etc., etc. I mean, do you have, these are people who will all have jobs around the world, 30 different countries and houses. I don't know what you would have to do to attract them and allow. So would the Ukrainian government essentially have to ensure that they're getting paid enough, in order to attract them from another job? Would they pay? I don't know. And then what about their house and their families back at, I'm sure there's lots to think about there. But anyway, the principle is that they could get enough for at least, part of the unit there, or some kind of smaller unit that may be a bespoke unit that does something particular, like an engineering unit or maintenance unit or something. I don't know, but that's good news, I think. Hopefully that can come to fruition, because the Ukrainians need boots on the ground, and they've lost so many bodies through basically exiled Ukrainians. People, well, not exiled, that's the wrong word completely. People who have escaped from the country at the beginning of the war, even before the war, actually, is just kind of economic migrants that want to support Ukraine militarily, but aren't so confident that if they went back to Ukraine to sign up, that they would get the right training, the right equipment. Whereas if you are doing it through these units that say Poland and Czechia and France and Operation Interflex or whatever, all these different training scenarios inside Europe, inside the EU and the UK, it may be that gives a lot more confidence to people to join those units, thinking they'll get the right training, the right equipment, and they'll be in a better position, less chance of dying, essentially. As soon as you're thrown into battle, under-trained and under-equipped. Okay, Yevgenia Zakharevska has said that the general mobilization of women is long overdue. So in an interview with Hromadske, she, a lawyer and soldier of the 92nd Separate Assault Brigade, calls for the mandatory mobilization of women in Ukraine. She emphasizes that with the current losses, it's crucial to establish rotations and intensify mobilization to ensure proper replenishment. The choice is simple: occupation, emigration, or resistance. I choose resistance. This is still the biggest challenge, isn't it? Mobilization, getting people to defend a country without completely hollowing out the entire society, industry, the economy, and forcing people to run away outside as refugees out of the country. So it's that delicate balance. You've got to hit the sweet spot. And the argument has long been that Zelensky's been too slow. The government's been too cautious with how they go about mobilization. The problem is that leads to collapses on the front line due to undermanned, under-rotated forces. Okay, German aid to Ukraine says then, when we asked whether military aid for Ukraine should be increased in view of the North Korean support for Russia's war, so this is in Germany, Chancellor Scholz, so Olaf Scholz asked, okay, should we as Germany give more aid to Ukraine because the North Koreans are now involved? He pointed out that it would already make a considerable difference on the battlefield if partners would deliver some of their pledges. And this goes back to what Zelensky said, which is there's been this great improvement in pledges being converted into actual aid on the battlefield. But to Olaf Scholz's point, there is a bit of a pivot here, or there's a bit of a not answering the question. Would you give more aid? Well, actually, it would help if people got their stuff on time. That is an evasion. But it is also a good point, as in it is the salient point. There needs to be, even though it's improved, as according to Zelensky, there still needs to be a quickening of the pledges being converted into actual equipment on the front line. I think Germany are doing a fairly decent job. I'm sure German aid to Ukraine would back me up on this, because I think Germany's worked really hard to A, give stuff, and B, get it to Ukraine. There's a real transparency there, whereby you can see when they pledge stuff and when they deliver it, and the German government website does that. And that's great, because you can then hold them to account. And actually, I think it helps them to chivvy things along. Whereas other nations, like, yeah, vaguely, so we're going to give them this, and then a year later, it's like, is that gone there yet? Not really. We're still in a factory, like, giving it a buff up. there are definitely many nations who need to speed up the delivery, the UK included. When the Labour government got in, they said, well, we're going to give more, but also we're just going to make sure the stuff that we'd already pledged actually gets to Ukraine, because there's still a load of stuff that hasn't got to Ukraine yet. And that was an admission from my own government that was a problem. Okay, North Korea gets 200 million dollars, rice, space tech for joining Russia's war in Ukraine. That's according to Rymetal. So North Korea's troop support to Russia may be based on expectations that a Trump US election win would end Ukraine aid, as per South Korean intelligence. Wow. And you've heard me bang on about how challenging I think a Trump victory will be. You know I'm not a fan of Trump in any way, shape or form. I think he's morally bankrupt as a human being, just as a single human being. I think he's a terrible human being. He has had more affairs in his marriages than I care to think about. He has been found liable for sexual abuse, which the judge has confirmed is rape. He is, it's 91 felony counts that he's being charged for at the moment. Then you've got all the ones that are just waiting to get into court, or just you're thinking this man is not a decent human. So on that side of things, I'm not a fan of him. And then with Ukraine, if it comes to Ukraine, he's just, I think, again, morally and politically bankrupt. He doesn't have the right idea. Now, if the South Korean intelligence are saying that that the North Koreans and the Russians are banking on Trump winning, then that's got to tell you something as well. The US under Trump could pull out of Ukraine, which would undermine one of the main pillars of the new Cold War-like structure that Pyongyang has worked hard to build in recent years in its close cooperation with Moscow, says the INSS report. That's a South Korean report there. Yeah, definitely worrying. And then finally, what do we have to say? Okay, this is the price of convincing Russians to fight in Ukraine, and it continues to hit records. So the average payment to soldiers joining the army being offered by the Russian armed forces is going to depend where you are, to be honest. As you can see here, you've got all these different regions, and they're not all going to accord with each other. Be interesting to see what the St. Petersburg and Moscow region. So Moscow region is right down here, and the St. Petersburg region is that one as well. So two of the lower ones are the more elite places. They're not offering that high, because actually, as long as people can join a war from these other backward regions of Russia, then that's good with us. And politicians' children and oligarchs' children from St. Petersburg and Moscow aren't being required to join up as much. But then now you look at it, and it's fairly similar, isn't it? All of them are grouped around this general very high mark there. Now, there are some claims that the monies have come down as a result of the North Koreans being introduced. We'll see if that has an effect. It'll be interesting to see this a month or two on from here, but that gives you a real indication of how much. I mean, that's an exponential increase there. That's incredible. It gives you an indication of, one, desperation, and two, the amount of money that the Russian government is going to be spending on this war. Absolutely phenomenal. This is an unsustainable expenditure, one would think, and no wonder we are hearing so many hearing about so many issues and cracks within the Russian economy. Just the amount being... I saw a pie chart of the amount they're spending on the war just this morning. I probably should have put that in today's one. It was just incredible. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. I'm going to get on now with a bit of an American politics video, because, it's Guy Fawkes night tonight, and that's usually when American politics comes to the fore. Burn it all down. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.